We are fighting back. As a community, as a county, we are fighting back, regardless of what the motivations are, regardless of what the investigations reveal. The fact of the matter is we cannot sit around and do nothing.
Developing now as we come on the air, a fight to keep a community safe. Officials say a man with a machete stabbed 5 people at a rabbi's home in New York over the weekend. And new tonight, we're learning more about the attacker, Grafton Thomas. Investigators found journal entries in his home they say expressed anti-Semitic sentiments. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says these kind of incidents should be treated as domestic terrorism.
There's a scourge of hate in this country. It's ignorance, it's intolerance, but it's also illegal, and it's spreading.
It troubles me, it saddens me, because when acts of terror do these sorts of things, they terrorize, they create more victims, and then terror wins.
Thomas has now been charged with federal hate crimes. Our Aaron Wise spoke with Jewish leaders in Macon about how anti-Semitic attacks like these hurt Jewish populations in other parts of the country, including right here at home. Aaron.
Some Jewish community leaders in Middle Georgia have a message for those who would dare to commit such acts of violence like those in New York here. It will not be tolerated.
People have a right and a freedom to celebrate their religion as they see fit, not to be intimidated or shot at or stabbed.
A right that some have tried to take away from Jewish people recently. For Greg Hirschberg, senior rabbi at Wfxl International in Macon, the attacks in New York struck a chord in his heart. Growing up in the Bronx, he experienced anti-Semitic acts personally.
I didn't understand what I did or what the Jewish people did that was so terrible that people would hate us.
Hirschberg says this is not only an issue in New York, pointing out an incident that happened in November at the University of Georgia with swastikas being painted on students' doors, as well as a similar instance happening in Milledgeville at Georgia College. Lawrence Mink, Temple Beth Israel's president, says he's never personally experienced acts of anti-Semitism, but is disturbed by the actions against his religious brothers and sisters everywhere, especially during Hanukkah.
It's a celebration of life. It's a celebration of the Jewish faith. And that's what made this event in New York so sad, is this person came in and tried to destroy this feeling.
Rabbi Larry Schlesinger says an attack on the Jewish community is an attack on us all, no matter religious affiliation.
That's why it's important for the righteous people of Macon-Bibb County, of this region, of the state of Georgia, of the United States, and throughout this world to say, no, we are not going to tolerate this kind of an attack upon anyone.
As far as security goes for Jewish centers in Macon moving forward, temple leaders tell me they already have safety precautions in place to combat against attacks like those in New York to keep them from happening here, which they say is a sad and harsh reality of the world we live in today. Reporting in Macon, I'm Aaron Wise, Wgxa News.
Aaron, thanks. Continuing coverage tonight as the man responsible for killing 2 people at a church in Texas has been identified as Keith Kinnunen, and police say he entered West Freeway Church of Christ and sat down with the congregation. How he got up from his seat while members were receiving communion, pulled out a shotgun, and then fired it. Kinnunen was fatally shot by Jack Wilson, a church member who was part of an armed volunteer security team. He shot Kinnunen just seconds after the suspect shot and killed the parishioners. With only 1 shot fired, he was able to stop any further violence in that church.
The whole thing was less than 6 seconds from start to finish. And, that was, I had to make sure I didn't hit, someone, a member there, as they were right in front of me.
The 2 victims have been identified as 64-year-old Anton Wallace and 67-year-old Richard White. And tonight we're sharing your thoughts and prayers after that shooting. Gloria Smith saying these shootings are getting out of control. John Tider says our prayers are with those in the Texas church shooting. And someone else saying, in part, my heart and prayers go out to families of the victims of the tragic church shooting in Texas. We'll, of course, continue to follow these stories on air and online, also on social media. Be sure to download the Wgxa News app for breaking news alerts as they happen.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeff Cox in the Skywatch Weather Center, 10:04 the current time on this Monday. We're headed in the opposite direction of where we were this afternoon. Our high around 70 across much of middle Georgia. But now that our cold front has come through, the sun has gone down for the day, our low temperatures for the day are happening right now. And notice we've already got a pocket of 40 setting up in the metro area. 48 now in Gray, 49 in Macon. That is the low temperature so far for today. Also 49 down the road in Soperton. But in between, Dublin, you're still holding on to 50. So our typical cold spot, not the coldest just yet. We'll see what happens over the next couple of hours. We are starting to see a wind shift. Now noticing a northwest component to the wind. That's a sign that we're tapping into some cooler, drier air. And as our wind dies down tonight, that should enable us to get back into the 30s by tomorrow morning. In fact, here's the day planner for your Tuesday. Generally, I think right around 40 degrees. But if you're north of Macon, I think we'll have some upper 30s out there. By lunchtime, should be up into the low 50s. And by 5 o'clock, around the mid 50s. Notice, though, plenty of sunshine. It appears it is going to be an absolutely beautiful day, a great way to finish 2019. But all eyes, of course, on midnight tomorrow night, your New Year's forecast. I'll have the latest on that. We are tracking some late week rain. I'll have the timing day by day with that. And colder weather is coming. The timing with your 10-day forecast in about 15 minutes.
All right, Jeff, we'll see you then. Here tonight, civil rights icon and Democratic Congressman John Lewis of Georgia has been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The office for the 79-year-old said he was diagnosed following a routine medical visit with subsequent tests confirming the diagnosis. He will return to Washington in the coming days to begin his treatment plan, which will last for several weeks. Lewis says his doctors told him with recent medical advances, he actually has a fighting chance. Many political leaders tweeting out their support for Lewis. Former President Barack Obama saying, if there's one thing I love about him, it's his incomparable will to fight. I know he's got a lot more of that left in him. Praying for you, my friend. And former President Bill Clinton says, if there's anyone with the strength and courage to fight this, it's you, John. Hillary and I love you, and we join with millions of other Americans in praying for you and your family. Former President Jimmy Carter returned to his hometown church in Plains yesterday for the first time since his brain surgery last month. Now, Carter typically teaches Sunday school at the church, but some lessons got canceled so he could have time to recover. He's a survivor of both brain and liver cancer and has had several recent hospitalizations. Carter celebrated his 95th birthday October 1st, becoming the oldest living former U.S. president. A voting law in South Carolina is facing some backlash tonight. The part some say could cause confusion the next time people cast their ballot. New tonight, North Carolina's voter ID law is blocked by a federal court. Now, the court appearing to side with the NAACP's claims it could prevent Black and Latino voters from casting a ballot. Jennifer Emert with our sister station in Asheville, North Carolina, is looking into the issue and the confusion it's creating for voters.
The issue of whether you need an ID to vote in North Carolina has bounced back and forth for several years. Voters remain divided.
You want to make sure that that person, just like when you go to the doctor or any other place, that that person is who they say they are.
The required ID is just such a roadblock to people who may be moving or in college.
I don't understand the objection of having to identify who you are when you place a vote. That's as critical to democracy as so who's being elected, who's running.
The federal courts are again creating more ups and downs in what seemed like a decided issue when voters approved requiring IDs in 2018. That may be flipped headed into 2020, with the federal court saying it planned to block the requirement.
The proponents of voter ID are saying, hey, it's still too early to know exactly what's going to happen, and those that oppose it have called a 1 o'clock press conference to claim victory.
While we won't know the reason until next week when the court releases its full decision, it still creates confusion for voters.
Most voters are trying their best to keep track of what's exactly going on between all the redistricting changes and now these voter ID changes.
The decision is happening as the state election office sent out its first round of mailings to let voters know what was expected to be required.
At least one mailing has reached folks in Buncombe County.
Buncombe County Elections opened a second location at the Asheville Mall, giving people an opportunity to register, early vote, or have a voter ID made. They encourage voters to pay attention to what's ultimately decided.
We will just, notify people however the state tells us after, if the ruling does not get resolved before the primary.
I'm Christine Frizzell at the White House, where economic experts are celebrating a year of prosperity. We'll take a look at the numbers coming up.
Now at 10:13, a federal judge has dismissed a lawsuit by a former Trump national security official challenging a House subpoena after the chamber withdrew it. House investigators initially believed former Deputy Charles Kupperman had firsthand knowledge of President Trump's decisions regarding Ukraine. After House investigators subpoenaed his testimony, Kupperman filed a lawsuit, but the subpoena was withdrawn in November. Well, today, a judge in Kupperman's case ruled that since there is no expectation that the subpoena will be reissued, that lawsuit is pretty much unnecessary. Developing now, a new Federal Reserve study says President Trump's strategy of placing tariffs on imports ultimately led to job losses and higher prices. The president's tariffs included those on steel, aluminum, motor vehicles, computers, and leather goods. Economists with the Federal Reserve say tariffs on Chinese goods started a trade war and that 10 primary industries were later hit by retaliatory tariffs and higher prices. The Reserve says this past September, U.S. consumers and businesses paid more than $7 billion in tariffs. U.S. and Chinese officials say they're close to a preliminary trade deal that would give China some relief from some tariffs for drastically increasing purchases of American farm exports. The minimum wage is set to go up across nearly half of the U.S. in the new year. 24 states and 48 cities and counties are raising their minimum wage for a total of 72 jurisdictions, and that's according to the advocacy group National Employment Law Project. The increase goes into effect on New Year's Day for 20 states, along with 26 cities and counties, mostly in California. The rest will raise theirs later in the year. Raising the minimum wage has been a hotly contested issue. Now, earlier this year, the U.S. House passed the Raise the Wage Act to make $15 an hour the federal minimum wage. That's up from the current $7.25 an hour, but that bill failed in the Senate. As we get ready to head into the new decade, get ready to hear this phrase quite a bit, the roaring 20s. But when it comes to the economy, there are new numbers, and then there are those with what those numbers mean. As national Sinclair correspondent Christine Frizzell shows us tonight, it's often different for different people.
They're becoming part of America's modern-day landscape. Businesses adorned with signs announcing help wanted and now hiring. The headlines boast of tech stocks soaring, the NASDAQ fueled by optimism, and wages rising at their fastest rate in a decade. Those wages rising even faster for low-wage workers than for those at the higher end of the spectrum over the last 12 months, according to an analysis by the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta.
Any economy grows on four things, right? It's consumption, investment, government spending, and exports. We are hitting on all four of those cylinders.
Peter Navarro predicts a roaring 2020s and credits White House policy with many of the benefits, from low unemployment to the stock market successes to low gas prices at the pump.
Top economic advisors here at the White House say the numbers give President Trump a rare opportunity, not only to expand his base, but the Republican Party itself.
He's turned the Republican Party into the party of the working class.
But many disagree with that assessment and say the numbers only tell part of the story. That includes Patrick McHugh, executive director of the progressive super PAC Priorities USA.
The wages that many people are experiencing aren't keeping up with the cost of living, especially for things like healthcare, pharmaceutical drugs, and education, all of which are rising faster than wages.
His organization conducted a poll recently which found 41% of voters in battleground states say the economy is a reason to re-elect President Trump, but 44% say it's a reason to elect someone else.
Over 80% of the stocks are owned by the top 10% in this country. And so a lot of Americans simply aren't experiencing a big boost in their income and their wealth.
One economy, two diverging visions of who best to oversee it in the future. In Washington, I'm Christine Frizzau.
All right, that brings us to our question of the day. What grade would you give the economy today? You can let us know what you think on our website.
Current time is 10:18. I'm Jeff Cox in the Skywatch Weather Center. So much to talk about in the forecast tonight, but priority number one, what about tomorrow night at midnight? Well, no longer do you need to wait. One day until we bring in the new year, and right now the forecast trend is nice and chilly. I think the weather looks nice. No rain concerns at midnight, so if you've got outdoor plans, it'll be dry. Your fireworks shows should be perfect. Just wear the jacket. It'll be on the chilly side as well, but it should be to ring in the new year, right? All right, let's talk about your next weather maker. It's still a couple of days away. Notice the timeline here will be Thursday and Friday. It's a pretty busy weather map as well. In fact, there's really two weather makers on the map tonight for the end of the week and even part of the weekend. So weather maker number one will be this weather system coming out of the Gulf of Mexico. The timing on this would be late Thursday and all day Friday. At this point, thunderstorms aren't a big concern with this, but it looks to bring us plenty of rain. So a quiet wet into the work week. This will be the first weather system of the new year. Once this moves away Friday night, we'll have a second cold front come in for the weekend, and this looks to bring a shot of moisture in here on Saturday. The Saturday system will not bring as much rain to the area as the Friday system. So the weekend is not a total loss based on what we see right now. So when it comes to middle Georgia, that Friday rain chance sticks out like a sore thumb. So we finish the year and start the new year on a dry note. I think your rain chance comes in later Thursday. Friday is a soaker, and then we'll have a little rain on Saturday. Beyond Saturday, we've got quite the stretch of dry weather coming in for Sunday into early next week. How much rain do we expect in middle Georgia? It's a lot. Notice most of middle Georgia is shaded in that blue shading. That's going to get us up to around 1 inch of rain, if not a little more than that. So this is a bigger rainmaker than what just came through this morning. In southwest Georgia, the forecast trend is pretty similar. We finish the year and start 2020 on a dry note. I think Friday is the soaker day in southwest Georgia. And then once we get through Friday, odds are your weekend is dry and will stay dry into early next week. Here's the expected rain in southwest Georgia. I think the higher totals will be west of I-75. That's where we'll approach 1 inch of rain. If you're east of I-75, more like a half to 1 inch of rain. So higher totals west, lower totals east, based on what we see right now. Then beyond that, again, the weekend not looking too bad right now. Here's what everything looks like on the 10-day forecast. Up first, middle Georgia. 59 tomorrow as we finish out the year. We're up to 60 to kick off 2020. Thursday and Friday look wet but very mild. 73 Friday. Then we pay for it. The cooler weather settles in this weekend, and when it gets here, it stays. Every day next week, featuring morning temperatures in the 30s and afternoon highs in the 50s. In southwest Georgia, low 60s for the new year, 70s Thursday and Friday. There's the wet weather Friday, followed by cooler 50s for the weekend, and then it's 30s and 50s, sometimes 60s as we go through next week. Get through Friday, and we'll have a dry stretch of weather coming our way. We've got more news and weather still to come.
All right, thanks, Jeff. A massive buoy making a long journey after drifting at sea for 2 years. We're going to tell you where this ended up. It actually drew crowds of people eager to catch a glimpse. Now at 10:23, people are flocking to New Smyrna Beach, Florida to catch a glimpse of a rare sighting. A missing buoy that was situated in South Carolina suddenly washed up. Jeff Cox says more.
Much bigger than I had anticipated.
This beach buoy.
Wow. That's something you just don't get to see every day.
Bringing in people from all over Central Florida Sunday.
It took us almost 2 hours.
To snap a picture or play with friends.
It's just really fun.
The red navigational buoy washed ashore in New Smyrna Beach on Friday. The talk around town has been bringing in big crowds ever since.
Yeah, it's bigger than a truck, and we're like, hey, we got to come see this thing.
This is one well-traveled buoy. It's been at sea for the last 2 years.
I'm amazed how this got over here.
The Coast Guard says it's been missing from off the South Carolina coast since 2017. Buoys are typically chained to blocks of concrete. The Coast Guard says it's likely rusty chains and a big storm caused it to break away.
And I just had to come and see the size of it for myself.
The Coast Guard plans to use a crane to remove it. They'll decide if it can be restored or not. For now, many say they'll always remember the weekend the buoy made its way to New Smyrna Beach.
I don't want them to take it. I want it to stay here. It found its home.
That's something you certainly don't see every day. And so tonight we talk about the buoys that we use in the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico. On this map, every red dot represents a buoy out at sea. You can see many of them are right along the coastlines, giving us vital information along the shoreline, but also plenty of them out at sea as well. So these buoys provide us vital weather information. Things like temperature, pressure, dew point, just like a weather station in middle and southwest Georgia would. All of that data gets put into the weather models that we use and can help us forecast things like tropical storms and hurricanes. In addition, they also record things like how tall waves are, how often the waves are coming through, what the water temperatures are. So these buoys are vital, and when they get lost at sea, we lose that information, and the Coast Guard ends up having to put another one in its place. So now they found this one. Odds are they'll restore it and get it back out to sea, recording that vital weather information for meteorologists like myself. They are all over the place, so buoys are nothing new, but them washing on shore, well, that's a different story. Aaron?
Pretty neat. Thanks, Jeff. In the wake of deadly religious attacks, the president announcing a plan to combat the rise of anti-Semitism. Why some say, though, it is not enough. New at 1029, Texas and New York are just two of the latest examples of violence against religious groups. President Trump denouncing the acts. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo saying it's tragic and unacceptable for any nation to persecute for religious beliefs. Fox's Gillian Turner has the latest on the disturbing trend.
In the wake of the attack in Muncie, Jewish leaders are ringing alarm bells about a dramatic rise in anti-Semitism, not just in New York State, but nationwide.
There's an undercurrent of anti-Semitism that existed for some time, and for whatever reason, you're seeing it more and more prevalent and more out in the open, and it's scary, and it's obviously very sad.
2019 has seen an alarming 1,347 attacks targeting Jews carried out across the United States. But human rights advocates say it's not just the number of attacks that are cause for concern.
We're looking at an upward trend in assaults, meaning the more severe of the types of incidents that we track, and now murder, right? So that's where we're worried, that we're climbing up that pyramid of hate, and we need to put a stop to it, to dampen it down and stop it, because enough is enough.
This weekend's attacks prompting President Trump to denounce what he calls the evil scourge of anti-Semitism. Democrat Congressman Eric Swalwell claiming anti-Semitism is on the rise in America, and it's being stoked by @Real Donald Trump. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib accused the president of igniting violence, tweeting, quote, "He fuels people's anger and misguided hate." But Secretary of State Mike Pompeo came to the president's defense today, telling Fox News fighting religious persecution is a top-tier priority for the administration and has been from day one.
President Trump has made a true pillar of America's foreign policy, religious freedom, the right of each of us to practice our faith in the way that we desire to do so. And we work hard at this.
Pompeo also says it's not just Judaism that's under renewed attack.
We've all observed Christians under threat in the Middle East and other parts of the world as well. I've talked at some length about China and how it's persecuting over 1 million Muslims in Xinjiang province.
The Trump administration's top list of violators of religious freedom around the world currently includes China, Iran, North Korea, and Saudi Arabia. Looking ahead to 2020, the Trump foreign policy team's still working on a new policy that would make American foreign aid contingent upon how well countries treat their religious minorities. The plan's critics say it's just another political gambit to appease the president's evangelical base. In Washington, Gillian Turner, Fox News.
Many of you sharing your thoughts on the Texas church shooting. Lacey says in part, it's sad that a church even has to have security in the first place, but I'm so glad he was there. Lori Bremner says thank you to the concealed carry person, regardless of your background. This could have been worse. Cindy Campbell Thompson says imagine how many would have died or been injured had a good guy not had a gun. And Rhonda says good for the man that had his registered legal weapon. Thank God he took care of this. Look how many lives were saved. You can still join that conversation by heading over to our Facebook page and leaving your thoughts. We'll continue to follow this story on air and online as it develops.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome into the Skywatch Weather Center. It is 10:32 on this Monday night, a night that is now seeing temperatures tumble pretty rapidly. Our cold front has moved through, and now we're feeling the effect of that. Really didn't hamper us all that much during the day. Many of us were in the 70s, but tonight we are now seeing the lowest temperatures of the day. In the Macon metro area, that'll put us in the upper 40s right now. 49 from Forsyth into Macon, 48 right now in Gray. We'll call it also 49 in Soperton, but still some low 50s out there as well. So pretty wide range of temperatures in middle Georgia. By tomorrow morning, though, a chilly start to the day. Upper 30s are back there for most of the area. If you're looking for the 40s, head down towards Crisp, Dooley, and Wilcox counties. Similar story in southwest Georgia. The 40s are starting to show up. Right around 50 is the general theme. Albany, one of the hot spots right now at 53. But by tomorrow morning, certainly the low 40s expected region-wide. The exception, Dawson, Morgan, and Blakely. I've got you at 39 to start the last day of 2019. Your New Year's forecast, I've got the latest on that coming up. What can you expect at midnight? Also, we're tracking that rain chance for late this week and the colder weather on the way. When it gets here, the answer on your 10-day forecast coming up in about 15 minutes.
Happening now, Bibb County deputies are looking for the people who carjacked a 70-year-old woman at Vineville Christian Towers on Christmas Eve. According to a report filed with the sheriff's office, a woman parked an SUV in the back parking lot around 10:30 Tuesday night. As she prepared to leave her vehicle, two men approached her. The sheriff's office says one of the suspects put a pistol to her head and demanded that she get out of the car and give them her keys. The report says the men took off with the woman's 2014 Nissan Rogue, iPhone, and other belongings. Cordele police are looking for the man you see here. They say Charles Brown Jr. is a person of interest in a stabbing that happened around 7:45 tonight near the Quick Mart on 16th Avenue. The 26-year-old victim is in critical condition at Crisp Regional Hospital. And a Macon man who investigators once thought was a shooting victim is now the suspect. Robert Jarvis Lee is under arrest for a November 5th shooting and faces charges for aggravated assault. Deputies originally thought he was the victim in the shooting, but it was later determined that he was the suspect shooting at a house on Walnut Street. No one at the home was injured, though. Lee had actually been shot in the head and was found in the street. A 13-year-old girl missing from North Carolina has been found in Middle Georgia, according to the FBI and the Currituck County Sheriff's Office. The girl was found at a home in Spalding County just a day after being reported missing. The Sheriff's Office says the girl seems to be in good spirits and is set to be reunited with her family. The Georgia Department of Corrections is looking for an escaped inmate. Lawrence Vickers escaped from the minimum security facility in Claxton today. Vickers is serving multiple sentences for robbery. The execution of a Georgia man convicted of murdering a store clerk more than 30 years ago is set for next month. Jimmy Meters went into a Glenn County convenience store and shot the clerk in the chest and head. He took just $38 from the register that day. Well, after the killing, Meters drove to a hotel and confessed to the crime. He was convicted and sentenced to death in April of 1989. His execution is set for January 16th at 7 p.m. Before you head out tomorrow night to celebrate the new year, you might want to make sure you have a plan for your pets. Many animals are frightened and triggered by the noises that fireworks can make. Ariel Mallory went out to One Humane Society and found out some of the best options, and she joins us live now. Ariel.
Now, around this time of year and in July is when you'll most commonly see and hear people setting off fireworks. But our pets may not enjoy it as much as we do, and not keeping that in mind could put them at risk. A very exciting experience for some is very scary for others. Pets and animals don't respond well to loud firework noises and may run in the midst of all the commotion.
We also offer microchipping. If your dog is outside and it happens to get loose and we do come and pick it up, we can scan it if it's brought into the shelter.
Dean says just this past July there was an incident that resulted in the loss of one dog's life.
Back at 4th of July, a dog actually got loose from the fireworks and ended up at the shelter. It did end up passing away because it got injured in the process.
Mark Walker has been coming out and selling fireworks for the last 4 years now. He says safety with fireworks is also a very important factor.
If it's the big stuff, they need to be in a to where there's nothing obstructing it going up, like trees or something. They need to be kind of in an open area.
Not being careful where you set your fireworks off is not only a problem for your pets, but can be one for you as well.
They'll tip over and shoot where they're aiming, and so if it's aiming at whatever it's aiming at, a house or a car or something like that, it can do some damage.
Now, it's also best to keep in mind that animals aren't the only ones triggered by fireworks. Many military veterans suffer from PTSD when hearing those explosive noises. For now, reporting live in Albany, I'm Ariel Mallory.
Some good tips. Ariel, thanks. U.S. military strikes on Iran and Syria, how it complicates Russia's relationship with the U.S. and Iran going forward. Tonight at 10:39, tensions are rising in the Middle East between the U.S. and Iran. The Trump administration authorized military strikes in response to a rocket attack from an Iranian-backed Iraqi militia, which killed an American contractor. Now, the U.S. military called the action precision defensive strikes. And the Iranian-backed militia says at least 25 fighters were killed and are vowing revenge against American aggression. Fox's Kevin Cork has the latest tonight from Washington.
This was a defensive action designed to protect American forces and American citizens in Iraq, and it was aimed also at deterring Iran.
The silence of the strike's recordings belie their power and precision, but their message to Tehran was certainly loud and clear. In all, 5 targets in Iraq and Syria were hit by the U.S. on Sunday, targets controlled by an Iran-backed militia, a measure of revenge, said U.S. officials, for the death of an American contractor who was killed in a rocket attack last week.
This administration made a fundamental shift from where President Obama and his team were. We took a very different direction. We put enormous pressure to deny resources to Hezbollah, to try and deny resources to Shia militias like the ones that came after an Iraqi facility in Iraq yesterday, where there were Americans working to counter ISIS.
The strikes hit 3 locations in Iraq, 2 others in Syria. And while a U.S. response to an attack that kills Americans is not uncommon, Sunday's retaliation targeting Iranian proxies has renewed concerns of a possible escalation of hostilities, one that could lead to a proxy war with Iran or worse.
We are warning the United States, as we warned before, that their illegal presence means they are standing against the Iraqi people, and the Iraqi people have the right to confront them with all types of resistance.
A resistance that's seen the Iranians lean more heavily on China and Russia, both of whom recently conducted naval exercises with Tehran, which continues to insist that the U.S. presence in the Gulf creates insecurity in the region. Still, its relationship with Iran presents a unique challenge for the Kremlin and its relationship with the United States, because while Tehran remains a reliable strategic partner and bulwark against American interests in the region, its undeniable link to terrorism is something Moscow, ironically, partners with the U.S. to fight, a crucial cooperative that President Putin noted over the weekend, thanking President Trump in a phone call for U.S. assistance in preventing a terror attack on Russian interests. We also learned today that Vladimir Putin has extended an invitation once again for the president to attend Russia's Victory Day celebration. That is coming up on May the 9th. It happens in Red Square. The president previously said he was open to the idea, although it is an election year. We'll see if he takes him up on that invitation. Traveling with the president in South Florida near Mar-a-Lago, I'm Kevin Cork, Fox News.
Senators continue debate as to who could testify in an upcoming impeachment trial. I'm Ray Bogan in Washington with whether we could hear from former Vice President Joe Biden coming up.
From the Terrorism Alert Desk in Washington, I'm Lindsay Mastis. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is calling the stabbing attack at a rabbi's home during Hanukkah an act of domestic terrorism, and he wants the state's hate crimes task force to investigate. The family of suspected attacker Grafton Thomas, however, insists that he has no known history of anti-Semitism. They reveal that he has a long history of mental illness. 5 people were hurt. Thomas has pleaded not guilty. An Iran-backed militia is reporting that at least 25 people died in U.S. airstrikes targeting 5 facilities in Iraq and Syria. The Pentagon released these images of some of the sites, insisting that it will prevent an Iranian-backed militia from targeting American troops. The Taliban attacked Afghan forces in northern Afghanistan, killing at least 14. The AFP is reporting that the Taliban is not agreeing to a ceasefire, which is a requirement to reach a peace deal with the U.S. At the Terrorism Alert Desk in Washington, I'm Lindsay Mastis.
Developing now, 2 of the nation's biggest package delivery companies are starting the new year off with some fee increases. UPS and FedEx have announced it'll cost you more to ship heavy packages in 2020. Actually, new fees for UPS kicked in yesterday before the new year, but both companies say they'll charge $24 for packages that weigh more than 50 pounds. The threshold used to be 70 pounds. FedEx says its fee increase doesn't kick in until January 6th. Ring and Amazon are being sued over hacking allegations. The pair is getting hit with a $5 million proposed class action federal lawsuit alleging their camera systems are vulnerable to cyber attacks. The lawsuit also says that after reports of back-to-back hackings, Ring responded by blaming its customers, saying that they used weak passwords that have been previously compromised. The lawsuit is seeking $5 million in damages for negligence, invasion of privacy, and other images. Well, calls for witnesses in the Senate impeachment trial are heating up, with Democrats pointing to a new report they're calling a game changer. Even former Vice President Joe Biden is getting involved. Ray Bogan has this story tonight from Washington. Ray, good evening.
A new report in the New York Times says Secretary of State Pompeo, the Defense Secretary, and the former National Security Advisor met with President Trump in hopes of convincing him to release the military aid to Ukraine.
The new reporting shows that there were serious concerns raised by Trump administration officials about the propriety and legality of what the president was doing.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer reacted to the New York Times report, which also states Mick Mulvaney asked a staffer if the White House could withhold Ukrainian military aid. He says it's even more reason to call witnesses in a Senate trial. But one Republican says he wants a short trial.
The House Democrats have had plenty of time to try to demonstrate that Donald Trump committed an impeachable offense. They failed miserably.
Democratic Senator Doug Jones, who represents Republican stronghold Alabama, is out with an op-ed in the Washington Post, which reads, "The Senate must conduct a full, fair, and complete trial. I fear, however, that we are headed toward a trial that is not intended to find the whole truth." Meanwhile, Republicans have floated calling former Vice President Joe Biden to testify. He could shed light on his son Hunter's work for the Ukrainian gas company Burisma.
I would honor whatever the Congress, in fact, legitimately asked me to do.
Biden has gone back and forth as to whether he would comply with a subpoena to testify.
The answer is, I don't think that's going to happen again. Let's cross that bridge when it comes.
While the former vice president says he will comply with the subpoena, he doesn't think there's a basis to issue one. He adds, talking about it is a distraction. In Washington, Ray Bogan. Aaron, back to you.
All right, we'll see how it plays out. Ray, thank you so much. Well, a new report is claiming that the White House was warned about the incident that eventually led to President Trump's impeachment inquiry. According to the New York Times, a senior advisor warned that acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney last summer about delaying Ukraine's aid. And the paper states that the advisor told Mulvaney that he should, quote, expect Congress to become unhinged, end quote, if the White House went through with that move. The New York Times points to a previously undisclosed email conversation. It says the advisor suggested withholding the aid could add to assertions that President Trump was pro-Russia.
Welcome into the Skywatch Weather Center, closing in on 10:50 on this Monday night. This time tomorrow night, you'll be putting the champagne on ice if you haven't already, getting close to your loved one, and getting ready to ring in 2020. So we've got the trend right now, and I think if you're heading out and about for celebrations, nice and chilly will be the forecast trend. No rain expected. In fact, a clear sky expected, and temperatures on the chilly side. But hey, isn't that what we want to ring in the new year? Yeah, I think we all like it this time of year. Later this week, we'll be shifting our focus to our next weather maker, and in this case, it's going to be Next Weather Makers. We'll add an S there. The first one here in the Deep South, the timeline would be Thursday and Friday. This will be a low coming in from the Gulf, and it will bring quite a bit of rain to the region. At this point, I'm not too worried about thunderstorm development, but a good soaking is coming nonetheless. Then our second system comes in for Saturday. This will be a quick moving cold front, will not have nearly as much moisture with it, likely more of a middle than southwest Georgia impact. So a lot of rain into Friday and then a little bit of rain Saturday before things really clear out and cool down as we go into early next week. So when it comes to middle Georgia, look at the chance of rain over the next 10 days, and that next weather maker really sticks out. I think we'll end up with a few showers Thursday, but Friday is the wet day, and then we'll have a couple of leftover showers on Saturday. Sunday and beyond look very dry at this point. That Friday weather maker is going to be a big one, though. Check out the projected rain here. We're all shaded in blue, so for middle Georgia, that's going to get many of us up to around an inch, if not up to 1.5 inches of rain. So this is a good soaking for middle Georgia. Let's talk about southwest Georgia. Pretty similar scenario. Tuesday, Wednesday, and potentially Thursday dry, but then that big rain comes in on Friday, and then we dry out for the weekend on into next week. So if we get through Friday in southwest Georgia, we will set up a stretch of several dry days in a row. How much rain in southwest Georgia? I think I-75 is the dividing line. Along and west of 75, we get much more rain, upwards of 1 inch of rain. East of I-75, a little less than 1 inch of rain. So Albany, for example, would get more rain than Ocilla and Nashville based on what we're seeing right now. Subject to change, we'll massage it over the next couple of days. Let's break it down day by day for you on the 10-day forecast. Up first, middle Georgia. We'll finish out 2019 with a 59 and sunshine. We'll kick off the new year with a 60 and partly cloudy conditions. Rain Thursday, Friday, a couple of showers Saturday, and then the colder weather settles in for all of next week. In southwest Georgia, low 60s as we ring in the new year, 70s Thursday and Friday, real wet on Friday, followed by that cooler weather just in time for the weekend. We've got more news and weather coming up after this break. Welcome back. Current time is 10:54. A giant buoy washed ashore on New Smyrna Beach over the weekend. Now, the U.S. Coast Guard said it lost track of the buoy in South Carolina in 2017. The buoy washed ashore Friday night. Officials are working to come up with a plan to remove the buoy from the beach. The Coast Guard said it is working with Volusia County officials to get the proper equipment to remove it. Pretty interesting stuff there, and it drew so many tourists over the weekend. What's cool, though, is buoys are actually a vital tool that we use in the Weather Center. To lose one is not always a good thing. It happens from time to time, and sometimes they never wash up, so they'll regain that and probably refurbish it and put it back out at sea. On this map, every red dot represents a buoy that is actively reporting data to us in the Weather Center. Now, many of them are right along the coast, so we can see what's coming right up to the shoreline, but many of them are out in the open ocean as well. So in addition to reporting standard weather data like temperature and pressure and dew point and rainfall totals, many of these buoys are also reporting wave heights and water temperatures. All of this data gets put into forecast models, so not only are we tracking it as it happens, but we use that data to better prepare forecast, especially when it comes to hurricane season. Those buoys are vital, so it'll be nice to get that one back out at sea. Aaron?
Finally tonight, an experiment with a holiday present set a Texas family's yard on fire on Christmas Day. Nisa Lynn Parsons said her 12-year-old son Caden was pretty excited about the magnifying glass that he received as a gift. So he went outside with his brothers to use the sun to burn holes in newspapers. Well, the wind blew embers onto the lawn, which caught on fire, and the Christmas lights were actually starting to melt. The family jumped in and was able to put out that fire, and thankfully the firefighters
I love that
were not
picture.
called. Right. Look at that. It's such a boy, you know, like it's such a boy thing to do. Is get a magnifying glass and go out and
Look, as a kid, I loved it. I'd take pine needles and just light them on fire.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised our house didn't burn down several times.
Right, but only in Texas though, right? Does the whole yard catch on fire because it's always so dry.
With a magnifying glass of all things. Great science experiment.
Yeah, there you go. All right, that's all the time we have on this Monday evening. As always, we thank you for watching.
Nice time, by the way.
Yeah, we shop at the same store.
Daily.